Welcome back to the shop, everyone. This week's video takes place in 2024, week 12, that is March 18th to March 24th, and we are starting by opening the rest of the box of the seats. I don't know if you remember from last week's video, but I mentioned that the brackets don't match up to the seats, and that's because I hadn't opened everything that was in the box. There's a piece of cardboard that said seat adapters underneath, and so underneath that little piece of cardboard, as it just showed, was the seat adapter and the rails for this, so this seat will actually slide back and forth. So now that I have that stuff, let's get the seat out of the car, let's get the seat bracket off, and let's start checking out this seat adapter. Alright, so looking at the seat adapter straight out of the gate, I'm not overly impressed with the quality of it. Like, the welds are poor, the grinding's poor, but, you know, as long as it works, I can overlook those things. So let's just kind of, I took some pictures of it, and we're just going to try and get this bolted on. So the first three bolts go on, you know, fairly easy. They kind of start, but the fourth bolts will not start. So I'm like, take tape measure out. Let's just kind of see if this thing's square. What's going on? Like, why isn't this fitting? And yeah, unfortunately, one of the holes is quite a bit off, and like there is absolutely zero possibility of getting the bolt started. It is that far out. So with this on the bench, I just want to take some measurements and just kind of see like how far out it is. And the first set of holes looks like it's like 13 3/4, and the second one is I think this one's closer to 13.5. I don't remember what the exact measurements are supposed to be. I could look it up, but yeah, I mean, it's out, and there's no doubt that it's out considering the holes, or you can't start the bolts. Which, whatever, you know, that's fine, so long as, you know, all I gotta do is take carbide burr, and then I'm gonna use a drill, which is stupid. I should be using a die grinder, but grab the carbide burr and I can just modify that hole. But I'm just taking a quick look at the seat brackets before I start that. Alright, so now I've taken a look at that over on the bench. Sorry for the terrible angle, but whatever. I'm just going to clamp this to the bench through the carbide burr and my drill, which it's really not fast enough for the carbide burr. I really need to be spinning this a lot quicker for it to really work. But I'm getting some of the metal out. It's taking a long time, so just kind of taking it slow and steady. Move it a little bit, come back, test it. You know the drill. right here, we get a visit from my carburetor. Yeah, that's my boy. Alright, so I think now I can get all 4 of these bolts started and run down. So with that, let's throw these sliders on. There were no instructions that came with this, and the instructions on their website for this is not stellar, so I'm just kind of winging it here and kind of figuring it out as I go. So with the sliders just very loosely in place, just kind of activating them and moving them, making sure they slide, which they seem to be doing all right. So yeah, with the sliders kind of on there, I'm like, all right, let's, start tightening these down. And so I start tightening the first one down. And yeah, I run into a bunch of issues with this. So you can kind of actually see from this angle, but the slider on the left there, when it extends down, it actually extends and hits the bolt that's bolting the seat down. So the one on the right's okay, like it just clears. But yeah, the one on the left just hits it dead on, so you can't even bolt it down without it interfering. So what needs to happen is those sliders need to move inboard enough that the middle of the track clears those bolts. And, the lever that activates the sliders, it just bends to put them in between the 2 sliders. So it's not a big deal if those are inboard a little bit more. But these seat adapters are just, I hate to say it, I love these seats. I love the sliders. The brackets are good. But these seat adapters are just absolute horrid garbage quality. Now, these seats are no longer offered by Brom. They are discontinued. I had to special order these. So I kind of understand that they probably didn't have any more of these brackets, and they probably just had like the intern make these because somebody had to do it and nobody else really had time. They're, busy making seats, which is their main business. So they just, threw an intern at the specs and said, here, go do your best effort. And that's what I got. So what I'm doing here is I am doing some measurements. I'm figuring out the holes. I'm just to see exactly how off this is. I'm taking a bunch of measurements, and this thing is just way out, which obviously the fact it doesn't bolt up, the fact the slides are hitting everything. So, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it, but I am going to, off camera, I messaged Brom just to see what they recommend. But while I'm waiting for their reply, because I think this is a weekend, this is probably a Saturday or a Sunday, I am going to put the bolts back in the seat. I'm going to take my own measurements, and I'm going to recreate these brackets. But while I was walking around the car, I noticed a big puddle of brake fluid under it. And that's because we're leaking from this fitting. So I am stopping here in order to tighten that fitting because I don't want to leak all the fluid out of the car before I can bleed it, because then I'd have to pull the master off, have to rebleed the master. It would just be a huge mess. So we're going to stop in the middle of our seats and very quickly tighten this brake line. I'm going to check the fluid in the master, make sure I still have enough. And then I'm going to, I don't remember if I show you, but I'm going to go under the car and I actually just take a look around to make sure I'm not dripping anywhere else. I didn't see anything at the time, and so we are back to measuring this. So I've put the bolts into their spots and I'm measuring top, like left to right on the top set, the bottom set, and then I'm measuring from the top to the bottom on the left side and the right side. I think it was the same on both. It was 15 inches one way and 13 and a half the other. I think I'm just going off my vague recollection. And so with that, I am measuring the holes in the seat brackets. Another thing is those sliders, the way they had them positioned originally, they were actually hitting and overlapping the washers for the bolts. So, I mean, that's another thing. They just, like, the bolts for the sliders just weren't positioned correctly. And so this is after I've done some design work. I am cutting my first test piece because I'm going to rebuild these brackets myself. So this is my first test piece. I cut it out. I'm just kind of comparing it to the old one. And what I'm doing is I'm just eyeballing the sliders on there. And what I eyeballed was that the sliders weren't quite in the right place. Still going to hit the bolts. I went, oh crap, I didn't do this correctly. But what I'm doing is just comparing it to the old bracket to see how, out of square it was or how off it was. And then if I recall correctly, I might take this over to the seat and actually just test fit the holes if I'm really smart. Yep, so there I am, just checking it to make sure that it fits. And so what I did off camera is I moved the bracket sliders so that the sliders will slide over both the bolt heads perfectly. And since I did that one test piece, I'm going to cut out a second piece and then we'll go over to the plasma cutter and cut out the holes for it. And now that that's cut out, we are of course going to take it over to the bench. We're going to compare the new one to the old one, make sure everything's moved over, it looks good, compare the new one to the old bracket itself, loosely put the slider over top on the bracket, and just marvel at my handiwork because yeah, the second time I nailed it. You can see I'm doing a little happy dance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cutting out the rest of the second slider. So I need to cut another long piece and then I need to cut two short pieces to go between. And then I'm going to weld clean it all up, weld it all together, and repeat the process. So cut this, plasma cut it, cut two more short pieces, weld that together, make two of them. And yeah, we'll take it from there after I've done all of that. Since I've got all those pieces kind of ready to go, I want access to my fab table, and that means putting my radiator just back in the car, because that's the best place for it. It's the easiest place to put it, so that's what we're doing here. So with this all tacked up, I'm comparing my bracket to the old bracket just to see how off their spacing was, and man, it was off. But before I pat myself on the back too hard, let's just kind of test fit this and see if it actually bolts up. And it did. I am pretty happy with that. Just roughing those sliders in place. Yeah, I really can't complain about that. So the way that Brom had this is they had some socket head cap screws, some flat socket head cap screws welded to the backside of this. And I don't have any of those, and none of my local stores had any. In metric, which is what they were using, I should have just used Imperial, but I was impatient and just being kind of stupid. So, I'm actually building the second bracket now is what I'm doing. Sorry, but anyways, so I'll talk about that anyways. So the bolts that actually mount to the slider come from the backside or the seat side. They were flat socket head cap screws from Brom and didn't have any of those, so I ended up using regular hex bolts and just grinding the shit out of them and then re-welding them. You'll see that here in a little bit. right, so now that I got those all welded up, because I'm not a great fabricator, I didn't bevel the middle edges, which would have allowed that weld to sit more flat and I wouldn't have to grind so damn much. But here we are. I live and learn. I knew I should have beveled it. But anyways, so we're just going to grind for the next fucking 2 hours, it feels like. before we get too carried away, I'm going to take these over to the bench sander and just round the corners. All right, so at this point, what I'm doing is I'm drilling out those holes to accommodate a 5/16 bolt to come through, and I'm just opening up the other hole as well because the fit wasn't 100%. I'm not in love with these brackets the way they turned out, so I will likely redo these when I pull the car back in for body and paint. But for the moment, they'll do. Screw it. Let's just... I need to get the car on the road. I need to get it shaken down. I need to get it tested. I need to drive this thing again. Like, I've just got this urge to drive the car again now that I've sat in it, now that I've fake shifted it, now that I've hit the throttle, you know, just in my mind, just acting like a 12-year-old kid. I want to get this thing driving and going. So we're not going to stop and redo anything right now. We'll put it on the books for redoing it later because these are sufficient. So I drilled out those holes. I'm going to put a 5/16 bolt in through the back. I'm going to tack it in place. I'm going to grind the heads off, and then I'm just going to fully re-weld it. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want the bolts to dig into the fabric on the seats. Even though it'd be on the backside, no one would see it. It really wouldn't hurt anything. I just don't want to do that. Alright, well, with all of the 5/16 bolts welded on, I think I've got all the heads ground off at this point in time. It is time to do a little bit of cleanup in the shop, because, yeah, those are pretty hot. I can't really do anything with them until they cool down, and the shop's a bit of a mess. Now those have cooled down a little bit. We are going to paint them. So throw a coat on, wait for a bit, throw some more coats on, you know the deal. So now I'm finishing this coat. I usually cut stuff like this out, but this is a lot of what working on the car is. I got the paint on, I'm waiting to do something else, so I'm just killing time dicking around on my phone. Alright, so I think that's all dried. I may have done another coat off camera, but I mean, you've seen me paint, so whatever. So we're just going to get this kind of put together, fastened down, and then get this in the car and see what's up. So yeah, with this all tightened down, I can activate the slider, and the slider goes all the way forward, all the way back. It perfectly clears the head of the bolt mounting the bracket or the adapter to the seat. So I'm super freaking happy with this. Alright, so with the seat adapter in the car, let's throw the seat in. And with the seat in, what we'll then try and do is, slide this forward. So with the seat loosely in the car, I think I've got a couple of the bolts on. So, trying to get it to slide, and I just have a hell of a time getting this thing to slide properly. I mean, it kind of works. So I just kind of jump in and I'm like, well, I'll try it with me sitting in the car. And so, you know, I'm working on it and it's not sliding all that well or all that nice. So I'm just like, what the hell's going on here, you know? But I'm still like a kid in a candy store playing with the pedals and, you know, hands on the wheel and just, you know, oh man, like just envisioning driving the car. But we got to figure out the slider out and how to mount this. So we're going to pull the seat out. I think I pulled the bracket out. Maybe, maybe not. No, because I noticed right here that the bolts that mount the seat slide to the brackets hit. So because the 5/16 bolts I put in are just too long, they actually hit the bolts that mount the slides to the seat. So what I gotta do is pull this all back apart, and then I will have to modify the seat adapters just to knock those bolts down a little bit. And what I kind of quickly showed you there is that one of the bolts actually broke. So one of the bolts that I welded in broke. You can see it's missing there. So that's not great. Might have been too much heat, too much torque when I put it on, but we'll have to get that replaced. So with the seat adapters off, I'm just going to very quickly start grinding these 5/16 bolts down. I'm just going to eyeball it. So as you can see, I've tried drilling this bolt out. It's a hardened bolt, so it's just not going well. So the next choice I have is make it liquid metal. You know, it can't fight me if it's molten. Unfortunately, I don't have any oxyacetylene right now, so I am gonna have to wait. And so that is all the time that we have for this one. So as always, if you stuck around this long, I'd like to thank you for viewing, and we'll catch you in the next one.